Welcome, everyone, to the WEI Tech Talk Podcast. Hope you're having a great day. My name is Patrick Gamble, and today we have a very special guest. His name is Mark Gabryjelski, and he currently serves as WEI's Senior Architect and Virtualization Ambassador. He's VCDX number 23, and interestingly enough, Mark was one of the first non-VMware employees to have earned the certification about 15 years ago at this time. So Mark joins us today. He's going to explain what the certification is, what the requirements are to earn it, and how the certification has evolved over the last several years. So we have a lot of good stuff for this episode. Mark, first off, what is the VCDX certification, and how does one go about in earning it?
Sure. So VCDX certification is the highest certification that you can get inside the VMware portfolio, right? So there's the VMware Certified Professional, or the VCP. There's the Advanced Professional, or the VCAPs. And that comes in two flavors. You have an administrative VCAP and a design VCAP. So in order to achieve VCDX, you have to go through the entry-level certs. So you get your Certified Professional in one track. You get your Advanced Professional for design in that same track. And then you get your Advanced Professional for the administration in that same track. Once you do that, you hit a milestone called Implementation Expert. And that's just one of the digital badges that you'll see in people's signatures or websites that articulate them as a VMware Implementation Expert, meaning you understand the administration and the design. From that point, you can then go ahead and pursue the VCDX, or the VMware Certified Design Expert. So there's no actual real exam for the VCDX. It's a little different. You actually have to prepare for a defense by submitting a design. You have to come up with all of the documentation in order to actually prove that you understand how to design at an enterprise level. And there's a lot that goes into the design, and there are so many other conversations around that. I don't want to be redundant here, but in short, Patrick, you have to articulate what the requirements are, what the desired outcomes are, constraints, and then identifying risks and whatnot for the business, right? So it's requirements, constraints, assumptions. Again, that's a huge piece that you have to articulate, and risks. Once you go ahead and create a design wrapped around that for how you would solve the problem for the business and help them achieve their outcomes by being aware of those four major areas, you submit this design, including all the operational guidance, the validation, and putting that design together is one step. Once you submit your design, if you're accepted, you're then expected to deliver an in-person defense for roughly 2 to 3 hours. And that in-person defense is you sitting in front of a panel of folks who are already VCDX and understand how to help score you in an oral defense. Once you go through and you get that invitation and you do your oral defense, there's a presentation you'll create for that oral defense, and you'll justify and defend the choices you made in your design. And lastly, you do get your VCDX.
So that is the epitome of going through the gauntlet. I have to ask, before we go any further, have you yourself ever sat on a panel to review someone's defense?
Yes, I have. And yeah, it's a large responsibility that requires just as much time and effort, in my mind, as it is to submit.
So that was a great review of what that is like, what the certification process is like, and what's part of it. But I would like to know more. What triggered your desire to be certified in the first place 14 years ago? Like, how did this all start? This is something I'd like to, I'm sure our audience would love to learn more about, because it can take you in so many different directions professionally. When did you know that you wanted to be certified as a VCDX?
Well, it's funny how you asked that question, because there was no such thing as a VCDX as I went through the program. So this is back in vSphere 3, right before vSphere 4 was released. They were starting to introduce those VCAPs, or that second tier certification that I discussed. And I was working with the VMware team on the betas and taking those exams and helping to polish them, providing my feedback. And as we wrapped up the administrative and the design exams, just at that point, they said, well, since you've done this much, do you want to try this new program that we're coming up with called VCDX? So of course I said yes, because I've been involved in a lot of, back end VMware activities in the early years when they just got started. So I stick with it. Then they handed me a blueprint, which is very similar to the blueprint that exists today that anyone approaching the VCDX would read through and take guidance from. But that was it. That was all I had for some help. And I said, oh, you know what? I can take this. I can do this. It's just a long implementation and operations guide built around a statement of work with a project plan. And I was actually doing a project plan at that time, and I just captured it and then submitted it. So then I was really surprised that the next step I had to do was go and take a defense because they accepted my design. So it was right at the tail end of VMworld that I went. So this is VMworld 2009 in San Francisco. So at the very end of VMworld, the last activity I had to do was sit through a grueling 3-hour defense of my design, the troubleshooting scenario, and the ad hoc design scenario that they still have. It was just the next step. I didn't even really think or set out to achieve the VCDX. I was like, oh, new certification, I'll take it.
And what was it like when that first design was accepted? I mean, how many hours did you even put into in building that whole design?
I always tell people it took me a long time. I have a rough number of hours. It was about 200 hours. But I mean, my customer who the design was for truly benefited from that. So it was about half of my time, half of the company's time to put that together because it was technically for a customer. But I put so much extra effort into it on my own time because I wasn't really sure. I didn't have any architectural guidance back then to lean on or have review. Today, there's mentors and such that can help you up through that journey. But back then, it was me, myself, and I. Just 14, 15 years ago, it wasn't as large of a community as there is today that would provide that level of support.
That was kind of where I was going with my next question. Are you finding yourself mentoring other younger virtualization professionals in this space, trying to give them kind of the 1, 2, 3s, the ABCs of what they should be looking into when they get their design together? Or with the community being so large, can you just find a lot of this online?
Yeah, you can actually. So I cannot actually be an official mentor and help someone through the entire journey because I'm a panelist still on the VCDX. So just to avoid any potential conflict of interest or perception of impropriety, I don't have a chance to fully mentor folks. But I think I've been able to assist in that process through some of the books that we've written in the IT Architect series. Like the art of infrastructure design. People still use that as a go-to when they're starting to approach that VCDX program and creating and submitting a design. And they work with their mentors. Now, finding mentors specifically for the VCDX program is very easy. You go to vcdx.vmware.com, and then there's a checkbox, and you can filter through the 300 plus VCDXs, and you can search for folks who are willing to mentor. And it's a simple checkbox. And believe it or not, the VCDX community is very approachable. Their goal, the reason people are offering up the ability to mentor others is because someone helped them through that process and they're continuing to pay that forward. The next batch will help the next batch and so on.
There's only a handful of VCDXs up here in the New England region and even fewer here in New Hampshire. I think we're pretty lucky to have you here at WEI from that perspective. Is there anything that you can offer as far as how your VCDX helps give WEI a certain edge when it comes to helping out its customers in the IT space? How does that help differentiate us?
Oh, absolutely. Because, as the certification states, right, it's a VMware certified design expert. The advantage that WEI gets by having that on staff is that kind of capability, right? We can offer our customers a whole design perspective, not just, hey, implement ESX and vCenter and put my backup software on. But really, we work with those business requirements that help us, identify what the business outcomes could be. Working within the constraints, working with and developing assumptions and risks as part of a design that we might be able to work with the customer on. And really, it's helping the customer achieve their goal, which is the outcomes, and trying to do it in an effective manner. Providing those options, taking into account not just the original requirement, but then the operations, the manageability, scalability, resiliency of a system. I mean, there's a lot of aspects into that. And when you get a chance to work with someone as they're developing an outcome that they'd like to achieve, which is great because WEI's got great account managers. We're deep in some of our customer environments. I'm in the 5th generation of one of my customers' data centers. We can help identify what they really want, not just from a business perspective, but then we also understand how to balance out that technical perspective as well. I mean, I could build you something that is amazingly available, but it might take 5 full-time staffers just to manage, one application. And that's okay for some organizations, right? That you might have an application that you need to deliver that requires that level of love and care. But then on the flip side, we're trying to make it as easy to manage. We're trying to make sure our IT team is able to own and operate this. So that way it's not just sold, but we can also own and operate that and deliver those applications to our business. And maybe we're focused on, cost reduction. Maybe I'm focused on, I'm constrained to one vendor. How do we do the most with what we have and approach that at the end of it all, if we can't meet the business requirements and deliver the outcomes that the organization expects us to, we're not going to succeed. So we always have that advantage, right? With VCDX type people on staff, where we can look at what the business requirements might actually be and how do we help you get there.
So with WEI being one of those rare VARs in the Northeast who has a VCDX on its team, Mark, is there any kind of unique example you can speak to where an enterprise, how has that accelerated their tech stack? Is there an example you can give?
Yeah, actually there is. And right now, I'm involved in 3 separate projects, but I'm just going to highlight one of them with one of our customers, where we're bringing in the design expert to have these conversations. And it's a customer, longtime customer of ours. They have about 80 or 90 ESX hosts that run their business, and they realized that quite a bit of their hardware is about to be unsupported. So they're making strides to replace that hardware. Well, the original ask was, what would we need to replace it? And our hardware team is excellent and able to build and scope that out. But from my perspective, as I was looking through some of the information, I saw some I saw some best practices being violated. Not a big deal, but at least we get a chance to call those out to the customer. And some of those little improvements or deviations from best practices will help the customer get more out of the investment they've already made. But then I looked deeper, and one of the presentations I did at the past VMware Explorer event was cluster design and working within some of the new constraints. And one of those new constraints is how we're going to manage and patch our hosts as we move forward. Well, the customer, just like most customers, right? They have very different hardware inside of the same VMware cluster. And not to go through the whole thing, but in the future, VMware is steering folks to use image-based management, which requires homogeneous cluster membership, meaning the same hardware from that perspective. So the customer had asked us just to do the hardware swap 1-for-1, and I injected with, well, we could start leading you down the correct path if we're looking to run this hardware in 3 years when the next version of vSphere comes out and we have to adhere to the new patching strategy. And we got their ear. I'm actually right in the middle of writing out the workflow and the transition from old equipment to new equipment, maybe restructuring a few nodes in the environment, but being able to look at it, not just to meet the requirements, but to look at what the customer's going to be owning and helping them avoid creating additional projects in upcoming years while we're, adding new hardware to the system. Just being able to have that conversation, I think, is a huge value. And that's just one area, right? I mean, we could do the same thing when we do our DR projects, our data center migration projects, moving to and from a hybrid cloud. We tackle that from that same approach. It's not just the initial ask, it's uncovering all the other details that are going to affect the ownership, the manageability, the scalability, the availability of systems for any organization, and having trade-offs between any two components, whether it's high end, I need absolute performance, or I want, an easy way to manage the environment moving forward.
So you're really just working to empower customers to take ownership of their hardware and really fully realize its value.
I would hope I am.
I'm sure they'll say the same that you are.
As the VCDX program started, there was only one, we'll call it track, right, in VMware, and it was data center virtualization. So my VCDX initially was just called VCDX. Later on, as VMware, and the years went on and VMware added additional product sets, they started adding in additional VCDX tracks. So, the first one they added was first couple they added was the end user computing, right? Because they have that whole Horizon stack. So they offered up another track. And once they did that, now my original VCDX was now VCDX for data center virtualization. So then there's the end user computing, then there came the networking, and there's another track out there.
That cloud management.
It is the cloud management. So that's the whole automation and orchestration aspect of things. So it's not just public cloud, right? It's how do you operate as a cloud? How do you help and provide automation into the environment, self-service and whatnot? So, but now there's 4 tracks of VCDX. So again, you don't have to, not everybody is going to be interested in, data center, right? Some folks are really interested in the end user computing and delivering that as a solution. The folks that do the cloud and automation focus there. The networking teams, they have the NSX or the network virtualization NV track. So it's a very different program today than it was years ago, because it's now open to so many more different skill sets that kind of align with the software VMware has to offer.
Mark, is there any other differentiators within virtualization that WEI has among other VARs?
Pat, that's an easy one. And that's our ability to offer training workshops or seminars, or however you want to refer to it. But we have, 3-day classes where we teach vSphere. We have 3-day classes where we teach other hypervisors. We teach disaster recovery workflows. We teach a backup and recovery strategy class. We've been doing an introduction to PowerShell for a lot of our customers and giving them a 6-month jumpstart as they're ready to start seriously taking on that PowerShell language and activities. And we're looking to expand that out. I mean, we've developed end user computing courses and introduction to Kubernetes with our application teams. So I think that's a huge differentiator because it enables our customers. And we'd be happy to sell our customers and not train them and let them completely rely on us. But what we end up doing is we end up training our customers. They put themselves in a great position to own and operate, and they know they can come back to us for some assistance if they needed it, or even another set of eyes as they're planning their next update or upgrade or migration activities. And it's great working with customers that have been enabled and understand a lot of the nuances that go along with any of those kind of projects where you have to really be conscious of the workloads running there. So WEI definitely focuses on enabling our customers, and I think that's a huge differentiator.
And just for as long as you've been doing this, like for you to just see a customer grow within their tech stack, I mean, at the end of the day, you can't really ask for much more.
No, and I mean, you can't ask for much more. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm in the 5th generation of one of my customers' data centers. I mean, that's a long time, right? And almost 20 years as the platforms have changed over the years. But everything from introducing virtualization to them, helping them shrink their physical footprint in their data center because they run out of power and cooling, helping them modernize and become more efficient, then helping them enable a whole engineering department followed up, now we wanted to start offering cloud services to their customers. So we helped them develop a cloud, a platform before the word cloud even actually really existed, to provide cloud services to their customers. And then seeing it polished and the next generation of that, it's a great and satisfying journey, at least for me.
100% agreed, Mark. So thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed your answers to these questions about VCDX. It's something that I know WEI values so incredibly much. For everyone listening, the WEI Tech Talk Podcast is available on Spotify and Apple and other podcast platforms. WEI, we're on LinkedIn, so make sure to give us a visit, as is Mark Gabryjelski. So if you have any questions for him, you can reach out to him there as well.
Absolutely. And thank you, everybody, for taking the time. Appreciate it.